This is Mr. Peoples, and today we're going to be talking about the war in the West. We have covered with the Civil War unit so far. We covered how the war began. We covered the war in the East, and now today we're going to cover the war in the West. And your learning targets for today, you should be able to identify the major battles and winners during the war, and you should be able to explain the importance of people from the Civil War. So there'll be a couple battles we'll talk about, as well as a couple people we'll talk about over the course of this section. Remember, the only things that you need to write down in your notes are what is in blue. Blue you do. Please remember to write those down into your notes. All right, let's get started. All right, the first person we're going to talk about today is a man by the name of Ulysses S. Grant, and you can see him there in the photograph. Ulysses S. Grant eventually becomes the hero of the Civil War for the Union, but at first it wasn't that way. He was actually kind of an unknown. Matter of fact, when he graduated from West Point, he graduated last in his class. When the Mexican-American War broke out in 1848, he showed bravery in that war. He was asked to go pick up some ammunition for his fellow soldiers. Doing so meant that he had to ride his horse across enemy fire. He does so, hiding behind his horse to shield himself from bullets, and he gets back, and his bravery was remembered for that particular action during the Mexican-American War. Now, after the Mexican-American War, he becomes a farmer, but he fails at that. He becomes a businessman, but he fails at that. So that when the Civil War starts, Ulysses S. Grant is actually working for his father-in-law and living on a farm that his father-in-law gave him, his wife's father. Now, when the war starts, he gets back into the military, and he wins a number of small battles with his regiment early in the Civil War. He eventually becomes the commander of the Union forces in the West, and he's known for wanting to attack. He didn't run away from a fight. He usually was the one bringing the fight to the enemy, and he wanted to attack. He did not like to just sit around. We're going to talk more about him over the course of this unit, but Ulysses S. Grant, we're going to be talking about some of the battles he was involved in today as we move forward. Okay, the Battle of Shiloh. Well, before we talk about the Battle of Shiloh, let me go to a map here just so you are aware of where in the United States we're talking about. When we talk about the West, we're not talking about for the Civil War. We're not talking about West out here in California. For the Civil War, we're actually talking about West. The West is the area near the Mississippi. And so right here, nice drawing, right here is the Mississippi River. And so when we talk about the West, we're talking about the battles that take place out in this area of the Civil War. So keep that in mind as we move forward. Now, Ulysses S. Grant wins a number of small victories in Kentucky, and then eventually he's put in charge of the Union forces in the West, and his job is to take control of two rivers, the Tennessee River and the Cumberland River, located in Tennessee. And so he marches his soldiers there, and he takes two very important forts, Fort Henry and Fort Donelson, on the Tennessee and the Cumberland rivers. And he does this relatively easily and continues to make his way south through Tennessee, basically dividing Tennessee in half. And when he gets towards the southern part of Tennessee, he rests and camps near a small church called Shiloh Church. And there he camps and waits for another Union army to join him coming from the north. And as he is waiting, the Confederates have started to build up their forces nearby him. And they start to show themselves a little bit here and there through the trees in the woods. Eventually, the Union Army doesn't think anything of it. Ulysses S. Grant was warned that there would be a possible attack, and Grant didn't believe that they were strong enough to attack, so they actually didn't believe those reports. Well, in April of 1862, early April of 1862, the Confederate General Johnston he decides to attack, and he catches the Union Army completely by surprise. And so this battle becomes known as the Battle of Shiloh. And the first day of battle, the Confederates almost completely won the entire day. They pushed the Union back from where they were camped. They pushed them all the way back to the river, where the Union boats could then fire cannons on the Confederates. Over the course of that night, though, the Union is reinforced by more soldiers. And so the next morning, Grant attacks the Confederates, and on the second day of the Battle of Shiloh, pushes the Confederates back and eventually ends up winning that battle. Now, the Confederate general in this battle, Joseph Johnston, is killed in this battle, and he was considered to be the best Confederate general at the time, but that loses his life in April of 1862. We're going to get into some more of the stories in class, specific stories about this battle, because there's some interesting ones. But at the time, this Battle of Shiloh was the deadliest battle in American history. More people died in this battle than in the Revolutionary War, and the War of 1812, and the Mexican-American War, just over these 2 days. Now, we just got done talking about the Battle of Antietam, and I know I told you that Antietam was the deadliest single-day battle in American history. Well, Antietam happens months after this battle. This battle takes place in April of 1862. Antietam happens in September of 1862. The Union suffered 13,000 casualties, and the Confederates suffered 11,000 casualties. Again, upwards of around 25 or 24,000 casualties, about the size of a Chanhassen or a Chaska, as far as the number of people killed, wounded, missing, or captured. As I said, this was a Union victory, so it's important that you remember that the Battle of Shiloh was a Union victory, and remember that Ulysses S. Grant was the Union commander in charge of this battle. Now, moving forward, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit more about Shiloh in class, but moving forward, the other battle we need to talk about here is the fall of New Orleans. The first obstacle for the Union trying to take over the Mississippi was to try and get through the largest Confederate city, which was the city of New Orleans, Louisiana. Now, the Navy was able to capture New Orleans in April of 1862, and then they started moving their way up the Mississippi River, and the United States Navy was moving up the river to meet with General Grant. Eventually, both Grant and the Navy meet at a town called Vicksburg, Mississippi, which we're going to be talking about in a future video. But it's important for you to know that the Battle of New Orleans was won by the Union Army, and it allowed the Union Navy to move forward onto the Mississippi and up the Mississippi River to continue fighting the Confederates. It also allowed them to divide the Confederacy in half so that the food on one side of the Confederacy would not be able to get over to the other side of the Confederacy, making it difficult for the Confederates to fight the war. The admiral in charge of the U.S. Navy that took New Orleans was a man named David Farragut, and here you can see a picture of David Farragut, who was successful in capturing New Orleans, the Confederates' largest city. Okay? All right, I'm going to pause here, and we're going to talk about the Vicksburg campaign in an upcoming video. If you have any questions, please let me know in class.